You. Welcome, everyone. Hello. My name is David Roylance, if you do not know me, and I run Speak to Shine International, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Sandi Goddard. Sandi, would you like to uh, introduce yourself to the room?
Hello, everyone. So, I am a business coach and mentor, and David and I work together quite often, particularly presenting or running workshops aimed at leaders. David,
Yes,
over to you.
and it's funny, we came together last year when we were sitting next to each other over a business networking lunch because we realized that we'd been having a lot of very similar conversations with the leadership teams and the people who own professional services firms, and in particular, a large number of law firms. Uh, and the conversations that both Sandi and I were having, relatively similar, really. There was a lot of conversation about adapting to generational shift, and the fact that this came up a lot. Senior lawyers, in particular, in most firms, are still bringing in business like they always have done, and a lot of the junior partners are just not. Uh, and uh, and so we were speaking to a lot of business owners who were really frustrated by that enormous divide, and that made a big impact on those business owners and their plans for sustaining the business, their plans for succession within the firm, and they're big challenges. Sandi, is it something you'd like to add that kind of came into our conversation?
Um, Pretty much that. The fact that, especially with the younger generation, if we call them ones that are called Gen Z, 18 to 30s, they have a completely different approach to their work life to the business owners and the that older team. So it's quite interesting. And I think it is down to performance management and leadership, which is what David's going to talk about.
Yes.
So,
So what we thought we'd do, this is the first of three webinars that we are going to do over the next 3 months. And we've created a 3-month masterclass intervention that's very much aimed at helping the professional services firms, the owners, to address all of the challenges that we are talking about. Now, those of you in the room, who here kind of resonates with that message? Can you give me, the firm you're working with? Thank you, Jeremy. And Jeremy? Do you mind unmuting and sharing your perspective on what we've just been talking about?
Yeah, I don't mind doing that at all. It's it's apparent that the younger generation. So I've been at a law firm which sold to ETL Global not long ago. So we're now part of a rather large international group of firms. My particular team are made up of under 30s, most of them. There are a few older folk like me around, but the younger generation really don't. Some of them are accountants, some of them are tax advisors, some of them are lawyers, some of them are ex-revenue. They've all had plenty of experience and now in the private sector advising private clients, families, that's that sort of space. They just have a very different approach or different view of how to go about selling high value professional services. And well, first of all, they don't think they're selling anything, which is part of the problem, I think, because that is what people are doing in this space or should be doing. And I've had the misfortune. I was given the job of coaching and training the whole team across all the sectors. So that's legal, accounting, and tax on effectively how to go about the business of getting work in, getting paid, and how to build personal professional networks. And it's I didn't lose my hair over that, but it certainly has been a long old journey trying to get people to engage, and even just to put into practice the basic, even for picking up the telephone, having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's they just don't do it. I sent them an email. Yeah, but how about talking to them? Well, I've spoken to them. No, you haven't. You've sent them a text or WhatsApp you haven't picked the phone. You haven't had a conversation with somebody face to face.
Yes.
And I've struggled to see. I mean, I've got children who are 20 and 23, and I have a slight insight into how they've grown up and developed over the last, particularly during lockdown. I think there's a whole range of issues which we may cover today. So,
thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. I think that you're right. There's a perception that the values of Generation Z are very different to the values of the generations that came before, and the general perception is that those values are incompatible. Sandi and I believe they're not incompatible, and that we can tap into the values of Generation Z so that they can do the things that need to happen in order to create a sustainable business. And that is the point. Now, raise your hand if you think Sandi and I are here to sell something. Just raise your hand if you think we're here to sell something. That's why we're doing these webinars. Because
Very perceptive, Maurice.
we promise that we're not going to disappoint you in that respect.
So you're here to sell us something, are you, Maurice?
Well,
sorry, I haven't got my camera up for some reason.
I could, but given that I've been in marketing and hardcore sales for 50 years.
Oh, is that all?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have a mantra that says, if somebody doesn't sell, no one gets to eat.
Exactly. That is absolutely true.
Absolutely true.
So
Gen Z, by the way, I've put this up because this is actually my second hustle, not my main one, but I am bumping into Gen Z day after day after day, and I just have to suck it up and get on with working out how on earth we get them to do stuff.
Very good. Well, hopefully we can help here, and because I've put my telephone number into the chat, you may see it there. And if during this process you are in any way curious to have a chat in more detail with Sandi and I would ask that you send a text to that number with your name on it. Yes? So if you hear something and you think, I'd like to know more, I'd like to go into more detail, please just send your name via text to the number that I've put in the chat box. And we'll leave that there and move on, because Sandi and I have created and are delivering a 3-month, 3-step masterclass, which is aimed at addressing all of the challenges that we're talking about in relation to Generation Z and how they engage with all the other generations. And you had an interesting statistic, Sandi, that you told me this morning about Generation Z.
They make up 27% of the workforce. So they're clearly going to be impacting how we work in the future. So we do have to learn to work with them, because they are obviously, as is every new generation, they are our future. So, and the future of our successors.
And I think both Sandi and I have a friend who is the Rainmaker for a full service law firm, who's a gentleman in his late 50s who would quite like to retire. His wife has a job in Spain. He'd quite like to move to Spain and spend time with his wife, which he can't at the moment because he's needed at his firm, because if he's not there, there's nobody else to bring business in. And that's a really tricky place to be in succession-wise. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So our 3 workshops sit under the title of Explore, Develop, and Present. And today, what I'd like to do is share some of the knowledge and the skills that we are going to share with the law firms we work with around Explore, the very first of the 3 workshops that we do as part of this program. And we'd concentrate, I think, on one area where I bring something unique to the table, and another area where Sandi brings something absolutely unique to the table. So if that sounds like a good use of the next 45 to 60 minutes of your time, do stay with us as we talk about it. One of the first things that we do, and one of the first things that I do when I work with any of my one-to-one clients, is have a look at, well, if there's something that they want to have in life, but they don't have it yet, it's because they're not who they need to be in order to have that thing. And so we look at, what is it that that they want to change about themselves? What aspect of who they are, their personality, if you like, do they want to change around themselves?
It's an interesting point, because there is an argument that we can't change our basic selves. So our personality is pliable. I mean, can we really?
Well, actually, yeah. Sandi, the majority of our personality is not. There are 5 areas that we can do something about. And so I focus on that. So the 5 areas of personality that we look at. I work with a tool called Understand Myself, and I send my clients a voucher for an Understand Myself profile, and they have 100 questions that they have to fill in, and I will call them and we'll have a chat, and I'll say, can you do this when you're in quite an equitable space? So neither ecstatically happy or depressed, but in an equitable state. And what happens is there are 5 malleable aspects of personality. They call them the big 5, where human beings can choose to do something about. The first one we have a look at is assertion. How assertive are you in relation to 100 people? So the 100 questions are all gauged in relation to 100 other people, and you get a score in relation to 100 people. So you have maybe a percentile of 45% assertion, which means in a random group of 100 people, you come in as the 45th most assertive person in the room. That means there are 55 other more assertive people than you in that random 100. So we look at assertion through the prism of how willing are you to take an argument and stick with it against people who are speaking against that argument, and how enthusiastic are you in relation to that which you assert. There's a truth that the most certain person in the room gets their way. There is absolutely a truth in that, and that's a huge truth in sales, because certainty breeds a feeling of safety in a room. So the less certain people are, and I think this is, you know, with the Generation Z, they've been through 5 years constant fear and terror being transmitted at them. So it's no wonder that we have a generation that perhaps is less certain than the generations that came before. So we look at assertion as number one. Number two is neuroticism. Now, nobody wants to be thought of as neurotic. But from a purely scientific perspective, we look at neuroticism as a personality trait through the lens of how do you respond to negative emotion? How do you respond to people being angry with you, for instance? How do you respond to a boss telling you off? And you have two choices there. You can either withdraw and be absolutely silent and wish that the world would just swallow you up and that you disappear, or you can be volatile, in which case you respond with a screw you and everything you stand for attitude. Now, if you're high in both of those areas, one or the other, or both, I have met people who are high in both of those areas, that is really negative on the way that you can handle the kind of leadership conversations that people will want you to have. The thing is, the business owners and the management of any firm are going to want to see people emerge who can handle negative emotion really well. So we look at that. That's also connected to the trait of agreeableness. I look very closely at the trait of agreeableness, and I look at it next to the trait of conscientiousness. And I'll tell you why. By looking at conscientiousness first. Conscientiousness I define as the willingness to work when you don't want to. The willingness to work today because you know it'll make tomorrow better. That's conscientiousness. You know, there are many people in this world, many people in this country who know that they ought to work, but actually this morning's on the television, so I'll just make a cup of tea and kick back. And yet there are many people who know at the end of the day that actually I'm a bit tired and I'd quite like to stop, but I know that I need to get this done in order that I can have a better life tomorrow. Now, most entrepreneurs fall into the second category that I have just described. And certainly being an entrepreneur, you have to have a very high level of conscientiousness, which absolutely most...
Can I jump in? Sorry, David. Can I just cut in? Hello, it's Luke Pipers from GBMM. Hi. Really, I'm enjoying this, but I just want to ask a quick question because I actually deal with personality typings all the time.
Yes.
I drive a team of introducers globally. Okay, and to kind of put it in perspective for me, with the personality typings with drivers, expressive, analyticals, amiables. With amiable types, they acquiesce on just about everything. The driver personality typing are quite forthright, and you can pick it up very easy on a conversation. I do it on Zoom calls all day long. I mean, I sit in the back of a room, and that's who whisper in my introducer's ears, perhaps a question that they might want to be asking that particular person at that time. All right, they're curveball questions, but what it does is it allows me to see what sort of personality typing that they're dealing with at that point. Also, when we start talking about these, with your analytical types, there are certain types of jobs that analyticals naturally resonate to. All right, researchers, IT, etc.
Yes.
I would say that when you start talking about what we were just discussing there, yeah, you're quite right. There is quite a lot of neuroticism out there at the moment, and it's a fear factor.
Yeah.
And a lot of that fear factor comes around from how people are now communicating and the way that we're communicating.
You're right. You're right, Luke,
Zoom
and
calls.
especially because Jeremy mentioned earlier that he's struggling with his Generation Z actually picking up the phone. It's not him. He's not the first person I have heard say that. I know of one law firm in particular who writes off about $6 million per year in unpaid fees because their junior lawyers will not pick up the phone to ask for money.
Yep,
I totally get it
every day.
Yeah, but I'm going to ask. Can you hang tight because what I'm talking about here, Luke.
Sure, David. Yep.
And you're absolutely right about this. That conscientiousness and agreeableness as a match. If you're high in agreeableness, you're probably really high in neuroticism as well. So. If you think, I've done a lot of work in the banking space. I won an award from Women in Banking and Finance. They named me one of the top 40 influencers for women in the banking space back in 2020, just when we were in the middle of lockdown. And we know that the banks are full of C-suite people who are really high in conscientiousness and really low in agreeableness. And agreeableness is the one malleable personality aspect that is different for men and women. So men are on average 20% less agreeable than women. And also, neural pathways in the brain at puberty for men grow almost exclusively behind the eyes, and for women, they're grown much more evenly through the brain, which is why there are neural pathways into the emotional centers of the brain for women that ramp up anxiety more than it does for the majority of men. Now, I'm segueing a little bit, but that's the reason that the agreeableness score is so much higher for women. And the work that I have done helping women in the banking space become promoted has almost always been about helping reduce that agreeableness, which then massively reduces the neuroticism score as well and allows them more easily to operate in the conversations that perhaps they weren't able to confidently in the past. Is that helpful, Luke?
Yeah, it's confidence building.
Yeah,
most definitely.
Absolutely. Maurice, you've got
a
hand
what
raised.
You say is not only what you say, it's the way that you say it, as you well know, David.
Yes, it is true. Maurice, did you want to say something?
Yeah, what partially addresses what's going on is that after about 1984, but progressively to the mid-90s, we moved away from push marketing, where we pushed ourselves and our message upon other people, and we moved to pull marketing, where we tried to do things that sucked them in and made them engaged and made them approach us.
Absolutely, Maurice.
But the reality, so that shift it can't have been any earlier than about 83 for various technical reasons. But I noticed it coming in about 85, 87, and by the mid 90s, everybody said, you must make yourself so attractive that people will beat a path to your door. Well, that's fine. But when you say to them, well, now go and talk to somebody and sell them something, they go, well, no, I'll just write something enticing and they'll come and buy from me because I'm so attractive, that must be the case. Naturally, A, it doesn't, and B, what Gen Z do not see coming over the horizon is that AI will take 70% of doing that away from these same human beings who won't pick the phone up.
That is a real problem, isn't it, Maurice?
Welcome to the real world, guys.
Yes. Well, the There's a rather wonderful line in the film Ben-Hur when Charlton Heston is being offered a post in the Roman Empire, and he refuses it, and the chap from the Roman Empire, the senator, says to him, "A grown man understands the world he lives in," and I think that's an important point, that actually you have to really understand the world that you live in order to be able to successfully traverse it. Now, I've got one last personality trait that is malleable, and it's called openness. Openness to experience. Now, this one's a fascinating one because it's not so much you want to change it as much as you want to identify that you're in the right space. Openness is kind of divided into two areas: intellect and openness to ideas. And the truth is, if for instance, you were, one of Jeremy's actuaries, and you had a really high level of openness to experience, you were probably in the wrong role. You probably want to be a painter or an actor or work in the arts. So I look at that one purely from the perspective of whether someone's in the right role. But the other four are really key, particularly the agreeableness and the neuroticism score, in terms of then helping people transform the value and the values that they then transmit in every engagement they have within their role. Now, once we've identified that and identified with the client what is it they actually want to change about themselves, then we can start looking in terms of action plans. What is it you want to do? And that neatly segues into Sandi and Sandi's skill and unique energy that she's bringing to this process.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask you a bit more about what you were talking about. I wanted to know how these malleable aspects of personality relate to our identity.
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. I think our identity is formed through the majority of the personality that is fixed, that we can't do something about. But we can expand what that identity is. So we don't actively change someone's identity, but we give them a sense of, well, actually, you've got more than you thought. There is more to you. You know, here's a new toolkit on top of the toolkit that you already have. Have you thought about using this? And when people discover that they're capable of doing things that they didn't think that they were capable of, then that sense of identity expands. I think often a lot that we see going on through media and social media in particular, and somebody sent me a message on LinkedIn going, "Do you support a social media ban for under 16s?" And I'm kind of like, I think I do, actually, because I think a lot of what we're seeing is helping people narrow down their sense of identity and use that as an excuse to not step out of their comfort zone.
Well, that's quite neat, actually, because that actually leads into what I've been thinking about Gen Z. I actually don't think that generation is any different to all the generations that have gone before. If you think about we're usually rejecting what it is that our parents' generation did or found important. So you think back to, and Ruby, you might be too young, the Teddy Boys, the Mods and Rockers, and every generation has to, in some way, work against the generation before or have values that they think are different to the generation before. personally, I think our values don't vary very much. And once we have our needs, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once we have those important needs covered, then we do have that really important aspect of fear. And if you look back over the previous generations, there's always been that one big fear. And Gen Z have gone through such a lot. There's the really serious and genuine worry about climate warming and how the world is changing in that respect. There's current wars going on. We have some really, really scary leaders in place around the world. And then on top of that, they've had to go through, as we all have, COVID. But we're talking about people who are still forming their relationships, their understanding, and it's very frightening. And I think insecurity has a huge impact on their behaviors. But as leaders, as business owners, we have to recognize that, but also recognize that they still have needs. They still have to find the money for a home. Even if they're living at home, they probably have to pay something to their parents, or they have to pay rent, food, utilities, clothing. All of those things that they have to purchase means they have to earn money. And I know from some workshops I've run recently with primarily aimed at law firms. There are two different approaches to this work-life balance. One is I work from 9 till 5. I don't network outside of it. And when I've asked the question, well, how do you build your client base? I will build it during the day while I'm at work. So I don't mind going to networking for breakfast or lunch, but I won't go outside of the 9 to 5. And then there's the others who will be evident to every business owner, those rising stars who have those aspects you've just been talking about, David, those drive and energy and an understanding that, and also that nature, that agreeable nature that's willing to go and talk to people. And those rising stars are the ones that are going to get noticed and promoted, in my estimation. And that's certainly what I'm finding with the conversations I'm having with my business clients.
So, and that, that chimes in very neatly with what I was saying about conscientiousness. And of course, if you're leading the firm, if you're the owner, if you're the entrepreneur who's made something happen, then your perception of that conscientiousness will be you work as long as it takes. It doesn't matter if it eats into your evening. So I have a question for you, Sandi, which is, how do those people, who are really keen to step away from the business, having invested 40 years or so in making it happen, how do they bring on the next generation then?
It's a difficult one, because I've had two lawyer friends of mine tell me that they were looking at merger because they couldn't get their partners to take on any responsibility. They didn't want to take on the role of ownership, which obviously liabilities come with that. And we're not talking about Gen Z here, we're talking about the millennials. But actually, mergers don't make sense because people are going to lose jobs. It's far more sensible to have some sort of build that succession within the business as early as possible. I've got a client in the Northwest, a manufacturing firm, and they are relatively young. They're in their 50s. They've got a youngish team. They've got about 65 people working for them. And they've been embedding this idea of ownership for the last 5 years. So their managers are now looking at moving up into those board roles and those ownership roles. And although it's never discussed, there is an understanding that eventually this MD and the FD will take slightly different roles and they will relinquish ownership. Ideally, they want an MBO.
Yeah.
But they've already putting that into place by training up their teams, by ensuring that there's recognition is one thing, I think everyone wants to be recognized. People say, oh, this generation, Gen Z, wants to be recognized. We all want to be heard. We all want to be recognized. We all want to be encouraged. And that idea of personal development, which you spoke about earlier, is really, really important. It's at the top of that hierarchy of needs, actually. And I think if we can embed those as early as possible into the way we run the businesses, become more inclusive, and if the company isn't, then we have to help them to pivot so they are more inclusive. Because you have to take your team with you. You have to understand what they want. You have to ask the questions. So
yes. And so how do we persuade the juniors, the jazz?
I see that for you and I
Yeah.
see that we have two options, and this is where the sales comes in. It's actually doing the performance management training at one end and the confidence at the other end. And I've already been, as you know, because I've asked you to join me, I've already been asked to run some courses from June onwards aimed at newly qualified professionals for the legal sector because of this problem of not picking up the phone, of not having the confidence. The anecdotal evidence is that people would rather go into another room to use the phone, so they can't be heard by their colleagues or their managers. And that's just not acceptable. We have to help this generation, these teams, to develop their confidence and also understand how to have difficult conversations. Yes. And also this influencer generation has to understand that we can't be a world of millions of influencers. No one stands out. We have to actually work together in order to be successful. And I think that is quite an important aspect of developing teams and helping grow those people who are really going to be the motivators, the ones who will take on the role of rainmaking or even running the business. But it's helping to identify them and giving them those skills so they can identify themselves.
You're right. You're right. And I think that if you think about what I was saying about agreeableness and neuroticism, particularly when you think about that in relation to sales, that you can't sell unless you're willing to take the risk of being rejected.
Yes, and then we have to blame the education sector for nobody understands being a loser anymore.
Yes. Well, the whole of education is based on the idea that making mistakes is the worst thing that you can possibly do.
I don't know if Luke has this same sort of, I don't know, ethos, but I believe that you have to make, for every 10 calls you make, you may only get one that's a success. It's all about numbers.
I would agree with you, Sandi. And actually what I do is, because I deal with many cultures, and culturally the way people make decisions are very different around the world. Yes. I had a massive boo that happened not long ago, hands up, and that was with it was a major carbon credit deal worth millions and millions, and the western side of the negotiation was getting impatient. And of course, in Asia, the first sign of weakness is impatience. Yes. And someone sat wrapping their fingers on the table. That went down like a lead balloon, Sandi. All right. Yes. Body language, everything comes into it. But the way I actually deal with it is for my newbies. I have a great expression: man with no target hits nothing. Yeah. All right. So I start when anyone joins me, the first thing I ask them is, what do you want in 6 months? What do you want in 9 months? What do you want in a year? What do you want in 5 years? All right. And they said, right, now let me show you how you can achieve that via this job. Now, the telephone needs to move at a certain pace. Now, if you're not making those telephone calls, we hit nothing. Now, how important is it to you to hit that target in 6 months? And I don't want to hear capital. I want to hear physical, like I want to buy a new car, I want a house, I'm looking to get married, all those kind of fun things. In other words, tangibles, all right? Things that are real to them, that make them tick, that they feel. It's all about emotion. All right, get the emotion out on the floor. And then what I do is I actually get them to write a presentation of what they're going to say on a telephone as an opener. And then I lead from there. And then I'll do various clinics, like when someone asks a question, how are you going to respond to that? And then I'll take them through the responses. And in fact, when I finish this course today, I'm on 2 conference calls exactly doing that this afternoon. So yeah, I believe that in business, when you're communicating, everyone needs a track to run on. Now, I use a very simple system. It's called FIDAC. It's no trade secret. I didn't learn it. Creative, rather, I learned it. Favorable attention. Let's make a friend. Let's get to know our client. Interest. Let's throw a hook. All right. So that they can listen. Why? Because when any communication goes on, just like we're doing right now, as we're all having this conversation on this Zoom call, and which, by the way, I have to thank you for the invitation. What I find is that a lot of people don't actually have a track to run on. So they sit there and they get nervous. They don't know what they're going to say next and how it's going to go. But if they've actually got a simple format to run to, they can do so. And so for me, I use a very, very, very simple step-by-step stage. And what I do also is, like with my team, I'll pick up the phone and say, do me a favor, throw me interest. Do me a favor, what's action? Give me a close. All right. And I just keep them on their toes like that. And I make it fun. And by making it fun, you bring out the enthusiasm with them. Yes, there are certain types in personality typing. Says, oh, I don't know what I'm doing this for. Oh, it's a waste of my time. But suddenly they realize that those achievers that are doing it for a reason, because they have a simple communication format to run on. And that's it. That's all I do.
Yeah.
It's no biggie on it, Sandi. It's just like anything, it takes hard work. And with the kids today, I think one of the biggest problems that we're getting with Gen Z is external influences. Everyone wants to be an influencer. And as you rightly said, we can't all be influencers because otherwise you're just in the masses, aren't you?
Thank you. That's really helpful. You actually reminded me that one of the best persons I've ever known he absolutely adored Jags, and he would have the most recent model, a picture of the most recent model on his wall. So that was the next thing he was aiming for. Or then when he got married, it was the house, and a really beautiful house, actually, that he lived in. Yes, it has to be some sort of something you can realize physically, something to aim for. And
as the old expression says, Sandi, reach for the stars, and if you only get halfway there, you'd likely to have a great life in the meantime.
David asked me earlier about action plans, and you also mentioned planning. And I find that whether I'm coaching senior leaders or whether I'm working with a business owner, those who actually have action plans and implement them are the ones that do really well. And I've got one at the moment, and I only said this to him last week. It's just amazing. I love it when I see someone actually putting stuff in their action plan and then completing it and coming back to me and saying, right, I've got here, where are we going next? And I just love it. But you can't do it without having a plan in place.
Yes.
And there's an exercise I use, which I was taught years ago, and that's a railway track. Have a rail, put draw some mountains, draw a railway track, draw a train, put all the most significant people you know and want to be with you in that journey in the train. And one of the questions once that's been done is, where are you on that train? And the number of times we're not driving our own train is amazing. I mean, how can we possibly get somewhere? And I wasn't driving my train. You know, I was so focused on everyone else. I hadn't actually thought about it. And we have to be driving our train. We have to know where we're going. And that
there's a great expression as well, isn't there, Sandi? From the sales I was taught many years ago. What do you want the client to say? And he said, well, you want him to say yes. Okay, let me show you how that works. Break it down. Your enthusiasm sells. No one likes to buy from a dried up whatever. All right. You want your enthusiasm on the floor. You want to feel passion that someone actually truly believes in what they're bringing to the table, no matter what the subject matter. Yeah, I agree. And, you know, that means driving that train, bringing the team with you.
This is one of the drawbacks, isn't it? When the owners get to a stage where they want to step away, where they want, they're looking at succession. They've left it too late. They haven't started early enough to actually drive that enthusiasm right through the business. And we probably are our best salespeople. There comes a point in a business where you can't be the only salesperson. You do have to have a team behind you, and that team has to be hungry for ownership. And I've also seen over the years how if you pay your team too well and you don't have those incentives in place, what have they got to aim for? There's no hunger there. There's no drive, because they're comfortable. They're getting everything without having to put any effort in. So there has to be that balance, hasn't there, of incentive, whether it's a share in the success, whatever it is. There has to be some drive, some incentive, something to aim for, so that the best go for it.
I love the analogy of the communist.
Sorry?
I was going to say that if somebody does not have something that they want in life, then there's no reason for them to look at any aspect of themselves or want to change. And if what you've had is 5 years of media and social media telling you that you can't have things, then you've got a real challenge getting a generation to believe in what they can have in life.
I think
which comes down to baby steps, doesn't it, David? I spent 10 years in the Eastern Bloc building teams that were communists, all right, and trying to make them little capitalists. Yes. And it was a lot of fun. And no one ever wanted to be the supervisor. Everyone wanted to be the same. And I had some really great times there doing it. And I was in Prague, I was in places like Poznan, Ukraine, I mean, all over the place building. And it was a project that was, believe it or not, one of the most capitalistic things you could ever do. And that was auctioneering. All right. And a lot of fun. Mental, and it's all about how you put that message out there. For me, David, maybe I am a sinner for this. If I found someone that actually had no drive, no will, no want, no get up and go, I generally tended not to employ them. It was, because at the end of the day, and when I did get someone to join the team, and I had big teams, believe me, I opened 8 offices in 18 months with 300 staff. That's a reasonable size promotion running. What I did is I used to drop them in the middle of the team after the interview. And when I finished with them, they'd then come back in. I said, well, how did you feel about Mary? How did you feel about Yanni, etc.? And it was about getting the gel right in the room.
Yes.
All right. And getting the buzz. It's the emotion.
Thank you, Luke. And so, Maurice, I see you've got your hand up.
I've got 3 fairly quick points. Firstly, Andy Lapata is a strong advocate of wish list boards. So what you do is you cut pictures out from glossy magazines about what you want. You stick them on a board, you stick them on the wall, and you look at them at least once a day and maybe more. Two, when you talk about not wanting to be listened to on a sales call, that basically means they don't want to be held accountable for anything ever. Thirdly, I prefer to work with people who have collaborative mindsets, not competitive mindsets.
Yeah.
And the ultimate competitive mindset are the influencers, because frankly, they don't give a stuff about anybody else. You're in the middle of that environment. And my experience with disc profiling over a very long number of years is you can change it, but it's a very long, very slow, very difficult process to do. But you will generally respond to the pressures on you in your environment. And it's very clear that you often have a different personality at work, because you have to, in order to succeed at doing whatever it is, to what you would be if you were left alone and they said, well, what do you want to do? And you're selling law, and what you really want to do is sit in a yurt in Oregon and look at the trees. End of sermon.
Well, you and I, Maurice, have talked extensively, haven't we, about win-win rather than zero sum, and that is the point, I think, of what both Sandi and I are looking to do, is create a win that's a win for the owners and a win that's a win for Generation Z at the same time. Because as Sandi says, 27%, right? 27% of the workforce is Generation Z. So we have to get them engaged.
In Africa, that's about 39%, by the way.
Right. Thank you for that. Thanks, Maurice. Sandi, how do we get them to step up, to get back to my question to you?
Well, I think it is about listening. It's about actually understanding them. And you actually said it. You said engage. The only way to engage with people is to actually have those conversations, to talk to them, and through sessions like the ones we're going to be running on confidence. And I disagree with Maurice on this. I think because they're going into another room to make the call, I don't think it's necessarily because they don't want to be held responsible. I think it genuinely because they're embarrassed and have no confidence, and they don't want to be heard in case they make a mistake or are held. People joke about it. Oh, did you hear what she said or he said? I think these are all the things that come from actually teaching them how to make the calls, teaching them how to be confident, teaching them how to have difficult conversations, because difficult conversations happen all the time at work for all sorts of reasons. Actually being mature and assertive enough to have that conversation about some area of your role or your salary. Sorry, I have a dog.
Do you? I didn't.
I'm trying to ignore him.
I hear you, Sandi. I think the great fear is...
I'm going to come back.
I think the great fear is judgment. That's what makes people move to a different room when they make telephone calls. Fear of being judged by others. The two great fears that I think human beings feel more than others, but they have to step over to be successful. Number one is fear of rejection. You have to step over that to be a leader of any kind. And sadly, we're now living in a society where we can deal with our fear of rejection by turning to social media, because on social media, you're rejected by the majority of people, but you never get to find out about it. You put a post on LinkedIn, you put a post on Facebook, and the majority of people in your connection base are just going to scroll past it. They're not going to look at it. So you get rejected, but you don't worry about it. But if you pick up the phone and ask the question, do you want to buy this? And they say no, you have to face that rejection. And to show any kind of leadership, you have to step over that fear. And of course, judgment is the next one, which is the judgment of your peers. Can you believe that they said that? Can you believe you asked in that way? Can you believe that's how you talk about our business?
Could I come in at this point?
Yeah, Jeremy, please.
What you're saying resonates hugely, because so my young lawyers and accountants that I've been training for the last 2 years, it is almost the fear of embarrassment and the fear of being found out. So you could probably describe it as imposter syndrome.
Yes.
There's a lot of this generation that we're talking about that, they've done their exams, they've got their letters after their name, they are now in a firm, but they just feel they are, an imposter. So they don't. Why do they go to another room to make a call? They don't want to embarrass themselves if they say something wrong. They get technically found out. They just don't feel confident in perhaps their abilities. Their knowledge may be lacking. Well, why wouldn't it be? They're not, they're new kids on the block. But it goes back to what you were saying, Sandi. I think it's the education at all levels is lacking, is weak. People don't have critical thinking as part of their learning. And when it comes to tax and law, you've got to have critical thinking. You've also got to be able to run an argument, and you've also got to be able to face rejection and face criticism and downright anger from people in the room. That should be taught. That should be part of the technical training. It should be a module. You should, how to sell what you know should be a module within all the tax, the legal, accounting, whoever, wherever you're going with it. And it's up to, I suppose it's up to firms like the one I'm involved in, that they then put these courses on for the staff. But I would argue it's too late in the process. They should have had this when they started at accountancy school or law school, because this is how you actually turn knowledge into money. But that's.
I would say, late than never, Jeremy, I think.
Yeah. I agree, better late than never. But I think the whole system, and this goes back to the regulators and the people that design the professional courses, why don't they think about this? Why is this not part of it? Create a course on resilience and sales training and techniques. I've been in many law firms where I've been asked to do some training where the senior partner leadership team say, well, we're not salespeople, we don't sell. I said, well, how do you get your clients? I said, they're just wandering off the street. And they said, oh, don't be ridiculous, but we're not salespeople. And I said, well, you are actually. You're selling high value specialist knowledge, and if you sell it by the hour, you'll be poor. So, but anyway, what do I know? I've only been doing this 42.
I think you're quite right there. I ask the question often: why is the handling of money not an integral part of the education system, so that when children leave school, they know how to look after themselves and not fall prey to buying the next shiny thing and then living in penury?
Tax and finance should be part of the basic national curriculum.
Yeah,
I know it is in some places, but it's not across the board.
Yeah.
I had a senior partner that in another firm I was involved in for a while, who was asked to pick up the phone to collect a debt, and he said, "Credit control, it's not my job." And I said, "Actually, I won't name him. Actually, sir, it is your job. Your job as a senior partner is to land the work and get paid for it. And you should deal with the payment and the terms of payment, so how much and how soon, on engagement. Not do a load of work and then send a bill and then have a dispute." And this
exactly, that's the chap that I was telling you about, who I won't name earlier, who writes off $6 million a year from in particular from the family law part of his full service firm, just because they won't ask for money on the phone. You're absolutely right, and those are the kind of things. It's insane that someone's willing, in their own firm, to write off $6 million a year, and this is what Sandi and I are working to reverse.
I did an imposter syndrome workshop 2 months ago, and interestingly, it was all women who signed up. And a further interesting point was they all thought they suffered from imposter syndrome. And when we did the exercises, They were midway, neither one or the other. And it was just specific issues they had problems with. So we were able to actually pinpoint what they needed to focus on going forward. But no, man, you're breaking up, Luke.
Luke, could you put it in a text in the chat box, because you're breaking up, and we can't get what you're saying at the moment. Your sound is breaking up.
So in another,
yeah.
I didn't get any of that. I'm so sorry.
It could be that Luke isn't getting us either, what you are saying. So I'm putting something in the chat box.
Again.
That's better.
Okay, I beg your pardon.
Your connection is loose, and when you touched it, it was fine, and as soon as you moved away, it
now. Is it?
Yeah.
That's better.
I was going to say, in a nutshell, David, I do think we can pivot in order to make the changes. Ideally, obviously, we should be thinking many years before we're ready to sell our businesses or leave our businesses. We should be encouraging and growing that team. But I do think we can pivot. It is very much about understanding what our people want, and also whether the messages align. I've found so often a company will say, oh, we're blah, 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 and this is our clients believe this, and so on. And then you find, A, the clients don't understand what the company is selling, and B, the staff are on a completely other wavelength. The messages aren't at all aligned. And that comes back to engaging with your teams, ensuring that you talk to them and listen to them. And it is about having regular appraisals, regular meetings to make sure both sides are understood.
Yes. And that idea of understanding the world you live in and not wishing that it were different, that but it's both the owners that need to pivot and the Gen Z that need to pivot, isn't it? It's like everybody has to contribute. And, the thing is that we know that typically Generation Z are not into selling. We've had a big conversation about that today. But we do know that a major value for Generation Z is contribution. And then how do you contribute? Because you can't contribute if you're not willing to sell. If there are people out there who you could help and you let them go because you are not willing to sell, then you're doing all of those people a disservice because you're not contributing. And I think there's so much to tap into, as Sandi was saying, that the values aren't that different. I think they're just articulated in a way that makes them look as if they are different.
Yeah, I think it's a myth that they're different.
Yeah.
The other thing that, well, actually, it's something my husband pointed out this morning. The people in the workforce dropped over the last 2 months, and that's hardly surprising given the budget last year and how everything's come into play in April. It is going to be harder to find jobs because people are going to be reluctant companies are going to be reluctant to recruit. It's going to be harder because AI will take the place, technology rather, let's not just say AI, technology is going to impact how people work and how businesses employ. So all of these things have also got to be addressed as part of that training focus, I think. So
yeah, I think that's true. And actually, selling is about the only thing that at a high level cannot be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
yes,
That people are going to have to step up and step into actively being salespeople of high level stuff. There is a ceiling, and I think that ceiling's probably about £1,000, where people will not buy without having had a conversation first.
There is one thing that is neglected and yet is vital. Not that they do it, but the job of marketers is to understand what the marketplace the firm is operating in is like, what it does, what the drivers are, what the pain points are, and everything else. And they then have to communicate that to the people who are doing the selling in whatever mode that might be.
Yeah.
And furthermore, they should be letting the world know what it is that the firm does, because education, strangely enough, is not part of a salesperson's job.
Yeah.
So again, if the marketers say, well, look, it's changing like this, the market looks like this, and I used to have to do 3 and 5 year projections for my boards.
Mm.
And if you just don't listen to that, then the change happens, and you sit there going, well, what on earth happened? And Sandi, once upon a time, I ran a calling team, C-suite, selling very, very expensive C-suite management. And it was more like 200 to 1. 10 to 1 is brilliant. I mean, if you can do 10 to 1, then
Yes.
you're a superstar. Talk to Luke and me.
Bob, you haven't said anything. I noticed that neither Maria, Alison, or Bob have contributed.
Sorry, I've been quiet. I'm trying to multitask at the same time. But
Hello, Maria.
I think for me, going back to what I think Jeremy said earlier, it's more about, you kind of assume people have got common sense when it comes to certain things, and it seems to be that you need to go back to basics a lot of the time.
So
it's those basic skills. Yeah, those basic skills that seem to be lacking. So that, I think that's the problem for me, and how to, for me especially, with Gen Z, it seems to be more about explaining why and what's in it for them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. I think that's the most important aspect.
Do you think that they have any sense of what they want? Particularly the team that you work with, Maria. Can you tell us a little bit about your business?
So I manage the support side at a law firm. So mine's more support staff rather than lawyers. But it's, for me, there is quite a big shift. And I think, again, it's for the older generations, you're asked to complete a task and you just do it. And for now, the younger generation, it is more a case of, well, why is that my role? Why should I be doing this? What's in it for me? How is that going to help my development and my progression? So it's more a use of persuasive skills now than ever before.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. And I worked a lot with about 15 years ago with a design agency that had about 20 designers in their studio who were very much tech-driven, early 20s, young men who maybe had 4 T-shirts in their wardrobe, and that was about it. And we'd bring them jobs and say, we'd like you to do this, and they go, oh, I'm not interested in this topic. You go, yes, your job is not your job is to be interested in it when I tell you to be interested in it. So I understand what's in it for me.
But I think there was once we started communicating with email more than the phone, and with blessed with letters and the phone, we started to hide behind emails.
Yes.
And that's been just a slide. It's just been a progression since maybe, I don't know, the early 2000s.
Correct.
So it's hardly surprising that a generation that's grown up with technology. I mean, I've walked into rooms where my grandchildren have been sitting with their iPads, and that none of them are talking to each other. They've got friends there, but they were all communicating on their iPads on Facebook. You know, no one was having conversation.
Yes.
What I would consider a conversation. They have changed, they have grown up, but that was a bit of a shock when I walked into this room and said, "Why aren't you talking to each other?" And they said, "We are."
And there's another important aspect to this thing around emails and communicating by text. Emails are read in the voice of the receiver and not the voice of the sender. And I used to run an exercise with the design agencies, designers, where I'd get them to send an email to another member of the team, and then I'd get them all together and get the receiver to read the email. And without any question, every single one of them would go, "That's not what I meant," when they heard their own text being read by another voice. So the business of genuine connection between human beings is the only way forward. And it isn't a level that we work with these Generation Z to help them step over the fears that keep them hiding behind email and text. Yes. Thank you for raising that, Maria. That's great. Thank you. Bob, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm working with a company, a group at the moment, and they're trying to put progression into place. And the biggest stumbling block is the person at the top of the food chain is demanding that they're involved all the time in all decisions. So the people who are trying to grow are being stymied.
Right.
And they're not allowing them to make mistakes. So they're not allowing them to grow and gain the experience of mistake and how to risk assess it. And I find that is the biggest problem with a lot of youngsters coming through. And when I say youngsters, it could be 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds who are coming through to take over a business. And you've got this top of the tree that says, "Oh, we did that 20 years ago and it didn't work." But like, a lot of the other people have said, all of that has changed. You can't do it all on history, but you've got to rely on history not to make too big a mistake. And I think we're not educating that whoever we're trying to get to take over, we're not educating them in the right way.
Correct.
Taking what Jeremy was saying about we're not teaching them how to do budgets and all that sort of stuff, but we're not also teaching them to identify what is a risk and what is a mitigation.
Yes.
Someone from a risk background.
Sorry about that, Sandi.
Nice to see you, Bob. Yeah, I remember years ago when I was running an agency I'd set up in the West End, that horrible feeling that my newest creative had a really, really valuable client that he was working with, and I had to let him make the mistakes. And it's a horrible feeling because you're thinking, he's a great creative, but how much is this going to cost me when he takes on this big project and runs it by himself? Because he's probably going to put in more hours than he should. He's probably going to spend way more of the budget than he should. But you have to let them make those mistakes, unfortunately. Try and oversee it as much as possible, but not to the extent that they don't learn. Otherwise, they're not going to stand on their own feet. They're not going to be valuable members of the business. So it is a risk, but it's one that you have to judge, isn't it?
There's one other part on that as well. You will always get somebody who wants to take on more and more responsibility. But you've got to be looking at what is their burnout factor as well, because suddenly they become the center of a group and nobody else then gets a look in. So you're perpetuating the same problem.
Yes.
Well, can I just come in there on that point about founders and owners trying to not wanting to give up anything, even though they actually want succession? I see that a lot in technical accounting and tax past. We've used employee ownership trusts as a tool to try and go early on the what effectively is an MBO in a slightly different format. It's been around since about 2011, but I tend to try and convince these founders and owners who are trying to build succession, is that if they don't do it, if they don't let go and they don't drive the value into the business, it affects the numbers, it affects the actual value of their business. It's less valuable if they won't release and let people get on and grow it, and butt out of the not completely. You don't want them to disappear and never come back, but they have to learn. And you hit your word you use, perfect education. You've got to educate both sides of that succession in how to actually do it.
Well, it is. You're right, Jeremy. It's everybody has to pivot to recognize the world we live in 2025, which is why our masterclasses are aimed at helping both ends of the spectrum in order to grow. Alison, do you want to join in, because you own a shop and you've got staff in your shop. What's your kind of take on what we've been talking about today?
Well, I've already got several different takeaways, but just carrying on that last point, I'm still actively looking to acquire more businesses, and the number of times I will have a conversation with a business owner and discover how far they're still involved with every aspect and therefore holding the staff back. When I did buy that shop in particular, I had a point where I was asking the staff their opinions on things, and they hadn't been asked their opinion on something for so long that one of them said to me, I've forgotten how to think, because they didn't need to. And the other aspect was, within a fairly short period of time, another staff member came up to me and said, how long does the previous owner have to be dropping by? Because we see what you're wanting to do in your culture and want to move to that, and yet they still have this loyalty to the previous owner. So as much as you want to do that handover in a very structured manner, it can be quite interesting. Definitely the thing about speaking to people, we're in a situation where retail is not in a good place at the moment, thanks to the changes, and they're out consulting about minimum wage for next year. In the 3 years that I've had this particular shop, minimum wage has gone up 50%. And I have no issue with minimum wage going up, but my sales aren't going up 50%. The price of my stock isn't going up 50%. So actually, it's creating a burden that is now destabilizing a whole load of businesses. So the idea about, I'm just looking at my notes, the idea about the action plans, I think, is really important. And I did sneak mentally offline and sent a message to my manager and my assistant manager going, right, we need to get refocused. But I really love, Sandi, your thing about where am I on the train? Because I'm not sure, if I'm being completely honest. So there we go.
Yes,
but I've really enjoyed that. I completely agree with so many aspects, and it's just reminded me of others. But actually speaking to people rather than just thinking that they know where we are and they're going to come to us is, we need to move forward. We will move forward.
Good. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, really everyone.
Good, I'm conscious we're approaching the 90 minutes that we said that we would at most take up of your time.
Thank you Sandi, for hanging in with us.
So it's been a wonderful conversation, and I thank thank you all for contributing. Is there anything, just as we come to a close on this?
I can't hear you.
I'm so sorry, Luke, but we aren't getting you. I'm afraid not. Do you want to put a question or a statement in the chat, and I'll respond. We'll respond to that. No, I'm so sorry. We can't get it. Thank you. But Sandi and I could probably sit and talk with you for several hours. And what we love to do is do exactly that with the professional services firms who were looking to transform their fortunes. So my question to you is this valuable? Is what we have just done these last 80 minutes valuable to you? And thank you for staying with us, because I believe that you probably wouldn't have stayed if it were not valuable. But Maurice, do you want to say something?
Yeah, one last call, and it was sort of what you've been talking about. I suddenly realised that I was being micromanaged by a managing director who knew less about marketing than I did. They knew more about corporate finance, but marketing, no. And yet I was being micromanaged, so I left. Now, if that's causing a talent drain, stop it.
Yes.
Because that also, I mean, when I'm running a marketing ruler over a company as to whether somebody should buy it or not, and whether we can rescue it or not, then things like, is there a succession plan in place, is one of the things that's going to dramatically affect it. And so, yes, it does affect the actual value.
Yes.
So,
interestingly, one of my clients has, there's 3 directors, a married couple who want to exit at some stage, although they haven't discussed that with their team, and this 3rd director who is desperate to become the managing director, but he's not there yet, and he's been a director for, I think, 3 years, about 3 or 4 years, and his personal circumstances have changed, and he's now got a 2-year-old, and it's really interesting to see how he has stepped up and changed. And he's just grown in the last 18 months. And he is actually now far more likely to, because they've been thinking over the years they might bring someone in to take on that role at some stage, the MD role. But he has just changed, and it's really lovely to see how he's grown up and is so much more capable. And he's actually bringing ideas to the table now for the other 2 directors in terms of how to run the teams, how to manage processes. And so I think it is very much a case of talking to people and listening to them and understanding them and trusting your judgment as well. If you think someone is good but not quite ready, trust your judgment. So
yes.
So that's actually for Alison. If there's people in her team that she feels not quite there, trust yourself, Alison. I'm sure you're building a great team. So
super.
Sorry, I'm finished, David.
But thank you. We're here because we want to help more law firms, more accountancy practices, more professional services firms get the kind of results and engagement with their 27%. So you'll see I put my mobile phone number again in the chat box, and I would ask if you are in any way curious as a result of listening to Sandi and I talk, if you think Sandi and I may be a good match to either get you or a firm that you work with or a firm you're connected to into action, I we would love to hear from you. So please send a text with your name to the number that I put in the chat box. And I promise I'll give you a ring and I'll set up a time that you, I, and Sandi can talk. Yes, and otherwise, I thank you very, very much for spending time with Sandi and I this morning. We will be back, and we will be doing this again next month. We'll sort out a date, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the link if you would like to join us. So, thank you again, everybody. Bless you.
Thank you, David.
It's been
Thank
great.
you both.
Take
Thank you.
care. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hello, Abraham.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's the
Good.
end, but thanks very much for showing up.
good to be here.
Take good care.
In Nigeria, but then I forgot Nigeria to correspond with 1010 over there.
Thank you.
Oh,
Bless
next
you.
time.
Yeah.
Next
Next
month.
time. Take good care.
Okay.
Luke, I'm sorry we
Okay.
didn't get to hear
Thank
you towards the end, but thanks for contributing so much.
Well, I will join
My
next time,
pleasure.
and I believe I'll share what I've got. Thank you, and remain blessed.
Thank
Bye,
you.
mommy.
Bye.
Bye.
Super. So.